Right. All right, today, welcome everybody. We are starting our first lesson in the new series of Yehoshua, Sefer Yehoshua, the book of Joshua. And I decided instead of going into Shoftim right away, we're going to go all the way to the beginning where the Torah ends. I think that it's interesting for those of you who haven't been with us before to know that we started 8 years ago with Tehillim. We went from Tehillim all the way through the rest of Tanakh. And now we're kind of going back to the beginning, back to the source of all the learning from the end of the Torah. And hopefully we will get now that we know the end of the story, now we're going to go to the beginning of the story. And I think that it'll give us some very good insights into all that we have learned and will give us a good foundation. So hold on to your hats. I hope this will be very exciting for everybody. Here we go. First of all, can anybody tell me who Yehoshua was?
He followed Moshe Rabbeinu. He was asked by Hashem to take the Jews to the Holy Land.
Okay, thank you. And does anybody know how many places in the Torah Yehoshua's name appears?
No idea. There must be many.
Yes, it is. And you know what? We barely recognize it and remember it. He is mentioned 26 times in the Torah, in the Chumash. And we see throughout the Torah what kind of a person Yehoshua ben Nun is. And today we're going to go through, this is going to be an introductory shiur of Sefer Yehoshua, but it's going to be just about Yehoshua and who he was. So we first experience Yehoshua at the Exodus.
Joni just
What?
Joni had her hand up.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Thank you. I just wondered if you knew anything about Yehoshua's father.
No, I don't know anything about his father. I can see if there is anything about him, but I don't know.
I don't know too many people who know anything about him.
Right.
I'm curious because his name is Nun, and I think that means anonymous, even the word Nun, no, or something like right.
I will find out.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
So Yehoshua at the Exodus is probably in his early 40s. And he is often referred to throughout text when Hashem is speaking to Moshe as the lad. Now, a lad you think is someone very young, but compared to Moshe Rabbeinu, he was young. Okay, so we know that Moshe Rabbeinu dies at 120 before the Bnei Israel go into Eretz Yisrael, and they were wandering in the desert for 40 years. So Moshe Rabbeinu was about 80 years old at the Exodus. So compared to Moshe, he was a lad. Yehoshua dies at the end of Sefer Yehoshua at 110 years old, and the entire Sefer of Yehoshua is written by him. Now, we meet Yehoshua very early on in Moshe's career, right after the Exodus from Egypt. And I'm going to share with you some of the parshiot to let you see. We're going to explore what kind of person Yehoshua was. So I'm going to put on the screen some of the parshiot, and we're going to read them together. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Shalach.
Okay, here we
Yes.
go. Okay, let's see, who do I see? Okay, Eileen, if you would read the first paragraph here, Shemot.
Okay, Parshat B'Shalach. Amalek came and fought with Israel at Rephidim. Moshe said to Yehoshua, pick some troops for us and go out and do battle with Amalek. Tomorrow I will station myself on the top of the hill with the rod of God in my hand.
Okay, so the first time we hear about Yehoshua is when Moshe and the Bnei Israel have left Egypt. They are if someone's drinking tea, and I'm glad they are, but I can hear
Too much noise.
I can hear the spoon, the cup, and everything. So
The ice cubes.
if you could put yourself on mute, I would appreciate and enjoy your coffee. So here we have that Moshe Rabbeinu is asking Yehoshua to pick some people because they're going to go to battle with the
Malek.
the Amaleks, the nation of Amalek, and he is actually having Yehoshua, trusting Yehoshua that he will pick the correct people, the strong enough people who will be able to protect Bnei Israel. So here is our first introduction in Parsha B'Shalach, and we hear Joshua's name, Yehoshua's name. Okay, the second, Joni, can you read for us, please?
Okay, Shemot 24, 12 to 13, Parsha Mishpatim. Hashem said to Moshe, come up to me on the mountain and wait there, and I will give you the stone tablets with the teachings and commandments which I have inscribed to instruct them. So Moshe and his attendant Yehoshua arose, and Moshe ascended the mountain of God.
Okay, now most of us really don't think very much of this, but Moshe went up to the mountain, but he was escorted to the mountain by Yehoshua.
Mhm.
And Yehoshua waited for him down at the bottom of the mountain while Moshe went up to the mountain to receive the 10 commandments. And this is one of many, many times that we know that Moshe Rabbeinu goes to speak to Hashem panim al panim, face to face, and Moshe is the only one that had that kind of relationship with God. But Yehoshua was so trusted that Aaron, his brother, was left in the camp with Bnei Israel, and Yehoshua goes to walk him to the foot of the mountain of Har Sinai and waits for him there. And okay, and here, go ahead, Joni, continue.
Shemot, Exodus 32:17, Parsha Ki Tisa. When Yehoshua heard the sound of the people in its boisterousness, he said to Moshe, there is a cry of war in the camp.
Now, many of us probably don't remember this line, but it's a very telling line. It tells us that Yehoshua was not in the camp of Bnei Israel while Moshe Rabbeinu was up in Har Sinai. He was still waiting at the foot of the mountain, and he could not see what was going on during the time of the golden calf. So what happens is that when Moshe comes down, he says to Moshe, he thinks there's a cry of war going on in the camp. He doesn't know what else to make of it because he hears all this kind of noise coming from the worshiping of this golden calf. So the only two people that don't know about the golden calf are Moshe and Yehoshua. And we don't, that's something I don't believe that we think about or remember when we read the Parsha. Okay, Zmira, can you read the next one?
Sure. Shemot 33:11, Parshat Ki Tisa. Hashem would speak to Moshe face to face as one person speaks to another. And he would then return to the camp. But his attendant, Yehoshua, son of Nun, serving as deputy, would not depart from the tent.
Right, okay. Now here, in this particular Parsha, Moshe Rabbeinu would go to the tent of meeting outside of the camp, and everyone, as he would go, would bow down, and a cloud or a pillar of cloud would descend over the tent of meeting when Moshe went into the tent. And that was a time that Moshe and Hashem would speak, and that Hashem would dictate to Moshe whatever part of the Torah he was giving to him. He would deal with issues that were happening in the desert with Moshe, and Yehoshua was always there and would not leave the exterior of the tent while Moshe was there. He was like, almost like a bodyguard, he was there and he stood there waiting for his master. And he was extremely devoted to Moshe Rabbeinu. He never wavers in his attendance to him. And we continue to learn, let's see, who else would, Dorothy? Would you be able to read for us? Is she there? Okay, Linda?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, Dorothy, can you read for us, please?
And Yehoshua, son of Nun, Moshe's attendant from his youth, spoke up and said, "My lord Moshe, restrain them." But Moshe said to him, "Are you wrought up on my account? Would that all Hashem's people were prophets, that Hashem put the divine spirit upon them."
Okay, now this particular in Parsha B'Shalach, no, I'm sorry, B'Alachtecha, in this particular Parsha, the reference is, if you remember, the Bnei Yisrael come to Moshe and they complain about they don't have any meat to eat.
Right.
And why did they leave Egypt? They remember that they had it so wonderful in Egypt. They had, they had lots of food and pickles and cucumbers and fish, and life was good according to them back in old Egypt. So and Moshe actually at this particular time, he asks Hashem, "Where can I get meat to feed these people?" And the cry from Bnei Yisrael is so intense and so relentless about eating food, this meat, that this is the time that Moshe Rabbeinu says to God, "Tell me where I can get meat, and if I can't get meat to feed these people, kill me." He says, "Kill me." He says, if I have to deal with these people, I can't find meat for them, I just don't know what I'm going to do. I've been a faithful servant in your eyes, but I don't know what to do with these people. And this, Moshe, we learned that Moshe Rabbeinu is so overwhelmed by the tasks that he has to give that that Hashem says, I'm not going to kill you. Calm down, take a deep breath. And this is where the council of 70 elders is selected, and where in this particular Parsha, there are two men in particular who are acting as prophets, and they really should not. And this is exactly what is being referred to here when Moshe said to Yehoshua, "Are you upset on my account?" In other words, Yehoshua had heard what was going on in the camp, and consequently he says to Moshe, my Lord Moshe, restrain them. These people need restraint. And Moshe says, "Are you upset because of me, or because of the people, or because of God?" He wants to find out what it is exactly that is bothering Yehoshua, so that he can resolve Yehoshua's difficulties. And so it really shows. And actually, what happens is that Yehoshua is upset on Moshe's account. He really had Moshe's back at all times, and he was worried about Moshe Rabbeinu. So let's go to the next parsha that we find his name mentioned. And I can't see everybody, so I'm just going to ask Joni, would you read again, please? You don't have to read. If you can read the Hebrew, that's great, but if you can't, just the English.
Okay, but we're the parsha above the parsha Shalach.
Well, first read Bamidbar 13. Yeah.
Okay. From the tribe of Ephraim, is it Hosea?
Hoshea.
Hosea, son of Nun.
Okay, now in this particular Parsha Shalach, this is the Parsha where the spies are being selected to go scout the land of Israel. They had been Moshe had been asked by the Nasi, the princes of the tribes, that before they go in, they want to find out what they're going to be up against. They want to know what kind of land there is. And so in the Parsha of Shalach, each of the people selected, their name is recorded and the tribe that they are from. So we find out that that Yehoshua's name was originally Hoshea, and he was Hoshea bin Nun of the tribe of Ephraim. Now, in the same parsha, go ahead, Joni. In the same parsha, if you can, I included the Hebrew. Go ahead.
Okay. Ela shemos ha'anashim asher shalach Moshe latur et haaretz v'yikra Moshe leHoshea ben Yehoshua.
Okay. Now,
I'll translate it. You want me to read it again?
No, go ahead and read the English.
Those were the names of the participants whom Moshe sent to scout the land, but Moshe changed the name of Hoshea, son of Nun, to Yehoshua.
Right. So here we have Hoshea, I have here, means to save. The word name means to save. Yehoshua, by adding the yud, means God will save. Now, Yehoshua was one of the 12 spies. He goes with Caleb and the other 10, and each one of the names of the spies are listed. And we know that before Moshe sends the spies off, he actually changes Yehoshua's name in this particular parsha, that God will save him and protect him. They have a relationship. that Yehoshua is very special to Moshe Rabbeinu. And so Moshe actually, it seems, gives him his blessing more than just a blessing. He changes his name and hopes that he will return with God's blessings. So this is the parsha of the sending out of the spies. And Eileen, if you could read the next one for us, please.
Bamidbar Parsha Shlach. And Yehoshua, son of Nun, and Kalev, son of Yefuneh, of those who had scouted the land, rent their clothes and exhorted the whole Israelite community. The land that we traversed and scouted is an exceedingly good land.
Okay, now as we know that Yehoshua ben Nun and Caleb ben Yefuneh are the only two people that come back amongst the spies and report that the land is a very good land and that they saw bounty, they saw goodness, they saw potential, and the others came back thinking they felt like as if they were grasshoppers. In other words, they felt minuscule to these people because the cities were fortified, they were walled cities. And when we hear about the walled cities and then we go and learn about in Sefer Yehoshua, we will understand what it means to have a walled city.
Rhonda,
yes.
I'm curious about the fact that they tore their clothing.
Well, they were like in mourning. They rent their clothes. They tore them as if they were in mourning. The people were wailing from this report. They were so afraid. They were so upset. And these people were gave such a frightful report. And of course, this upset Hashem exceedingly. And what happens? What do we find out happens as a result of the two who reported that it was good, and the rest, and the people bought into their report. And so what happens here, Zmira?
Midbar 2665 Parsha Pinchas, that's my son's baby, his name. For Hashem had said of them, they shall die in the wilderness. Not one of them survived, except Caleb, son of Yefuneh, and Joshua ben Nun.
So what was the decree that God said to the Bnei Israel in the desert?
They're going to die in the desert. They're going to walk around for 40 years.
That's right. The punishment was that they would not go into the desert. Into Eretz Yisrael. And so
except for the two of them.
That's right. So these two were blessed and they were able to go in, and the rest of Bnei Yisrael, after that generation, die in the desert, and their children get to go into Eretz Yisrael. So we find out that not only is he devoted to Moshe Rabbeinu, here we find out that he's devoted to Hashem. He is devoted to the concept that Hashem has said to them, to the people, this is where we're going to the land of Canaan. And no matter what, you are going to rid the land. Hashem wants them, when they go there, to rid the land of these idolatrous nations. And these people, according to the other spies, were too much like giants, and that they would be overwhelming, and they had no faith in God. That's the key issue here, is there was no faith in God. God says, I'm going to bring you into a land flowing with milk and honey. And Yehoshua and Caleb said, absolutely, we're in. The rest of the people said, no, 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 we are afraid. And this is kind of like a pattern of the people who left Mitzrayim, the Bnei Yisrael. We see throughout their from the moment they leave and until this point and beyond, that they are as God calls them, a stiff-necked people. Okay, let's see. Can someone, Linda, can you see this? Can you read? Or you?
No, I can't. I don't-
Okay,
My voice is not that strong.
Okay, Joni, can you read?
Okay, yeah, of course. Okay. Moshe spoke to Hashem saying, let Hashem, source of the breath of all flesh, appoint someone over the community who shall go out before them and come in before them, and who shall take them out and bring them in, so that Hashem's community may not be like sheep that have no shepherd. And Hashem answered Moshe, single out Yehoshua ben Nun, an inspired man, and lay your hand upon him. Have him stand before Eleazar, the priest, and before the whole community, and commission him in their sight. Invest him with some of your authority, so that the whole Israelite community may obey. But he shall present himself to Eleazar the priest, who shall on his behalf seek the decision of the Urim before Hashem. By such instruction they shall go out, and by such instruction they shall come in, he and all the Israelite militia and the whole community. Moshe did as Hashem commanded him. He took Yehoshua and had him stand before Eleazar the priest and before the whole community. He laid his hands upon him and commissioned him as Hashem had spoken through Moshe.
Okay, this is the most important, number one in importance, because this is where Moshe said, I think it's the only time in the Torah that it says that Moshe speaks to Hashem. Usually it says Hashem speaks to Moshe, and Moshe, Hashem is always speaking. It tells Moshe. Hashem says to Moshe. Hashem commands Moshe. This is the first time we find that Moshe is speaking to Hashem, and he says to Hashem that I need somebody who is going to take over after me. And at this point he knows that he's not going into the Eretz Yisrael. He also wants somebody that the community will recognize as a leader, as a believer in God, and someone who's devoted to Hashem. And the qualities that Yehoshua ben Nun has exhibited throughout his relationship with Moshe is exactly who Moshe Rabbeinu wants as someone who will follow him and who will lead the people into Eretz Yisrael. And it's a very interesting thing that he says, I don't want the community may not be like sheep that have no shepherd, no leader, no person to guide them. And Hashem agrees with him, and he says, yes, single out Yehoshua because he's been there for you. He has done everything, everything we could possibly have asked of the next leader. And this is the process of smicha. This is how ordination happens. This is smicha. He lays his hands on, Moshe lays his hands on Eliezer in front of the entire Bnei Yisrael.
You mean Joshua?
Yeah, right. Who do I say?
Eliezer.
No, Moshe Rabbeinu puts his hands on Yehoshua in front of the entire community. Thank you. And in front of Eliezer, the priest. Now, why not Aaron? Aaron has passed away. He's dead. So Eliezer is Aaron's son. And so, so Moshe Rabbeinu and Eliezer basically are giving Yehoshua smicha. He is being ordained and recognized by all of Bnei Yisrael in the sight of Hashem. And this
Rhonda,
is
sorry, go ahead.
No,
I was going to say, isn't that what they do today? Still today, put their hands on the rabbi's head to give him smicha.
I believe so.
Yes, I've seen it.
Yeah, they give him, and while Yehoshua was from the tribe of Ephraim, he is not a high priest. He is not a Kohen or Levi, but he is anointed as the next leader. And this is a very beautiful process. And this is actually anybody who's in any kind of a leadership role. I don't care whether he's the head of a high-tech company. I don't care if he's in a religious community, whatever kind of leader. This is how a leader, a smart leader like Moshe, make sure that what is being done today in the community will continue with proper leadership that is assigned and shown to the community before the leader departs or dies. So this is a responsible way to pass on the leadership, and we find that it was given to Yehoshua ben Nun. Okay, the next one, Rose, are you there? Can you read? I don't know if she's there. Cynthia?
Yes, Cynthia's here.
Okay, go ahead and read.
Devarim.
Are we doing Moses came together with
Yeah. What, the Parsha?
Devarim.
Devarim 32:44 Parashat Ha'azinu. Moshe came together with Hoshea, son of Nun, and recited all the words of this poem in the hearing of the people.
Okay, stay with us because you'll read the next one, Cynthia. Okay, so here in this particular, in Parsha Hazinu, it's I think the second to the last of the Parshiot of the Torah, the Chumash. Moshe comes together with, here again it says Hoshea, even though his name has been changed to Joshua, Yehoshua. And he says the entire history, this is Moshe, with
Right.
Yehoshua next to him. He tells the generation that is going into Eretz Yisrael, he tells the people the entire history of the Jewish nation, the forefathers, how they left Egypt, etc. And he gives them basically the entire history and Torah to the people, because these are the children of those who left. These are the people who didn't know the forefathers, and they didn't know the history of the Jewish nation. And so Moshe Rabbeinu is at the end of his life. He gives over the history of Bnei Yisrael to the people. And what is the most important thing that he says to them with Yehoshua by his side is that you are commanded to keep the laws of Hashem, the laws of the Torah. And so we go, Cynthia, the next Parsha, could you read, please?
Mizot HaBracha. And Moses went up from the plains of Moab to Mount Nebo, to the top of the summit facing Jericho. And the Lord showed him all the land, the Gilead until Dan, and all the land of Naphtali, and the land of Ephraim and Manasseh, and all the land of Judah until the western sea, and the south, and the plain, the valley of Jericho, the city of palm trees until Zoar. And the Lord said to him, this is the land I swore to Abram, to Isaac, and to Jacob, saying, I will give it to your offspring. I have let you see it with your eyes, but you shall not cross over there. And Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in the land of Moab by the mouth of the Lord. And he buried him in the valley, in the land of Moab, opposite Beit Peor. And no person knows the place of his burial unto this day. Moses was 120 years old when he died. His eye had not dimmed, nor had he lost his natural freshness. And the sons of Israel wept for Moses in the plains of Moab for 30 days. And the days of weeping over the mourning for Moses came to an end. And Yehoshua, the son of Nun, was full of the spirit of wisdom, because Moses had laid his hands upon him. And the children of Israel obeyed him, and they did as the Lord had commanded Moses. And there was no other prophet who arose in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face, as manifested by all the signs and wonders which the Lord had sent him to perform in the land of Egypt, to Pharaoh and all his servants and to all his land, and all the strong hand and all the great awe which Moses performed before the eyes of all Israel.
Beautiful.
Very moving.
Yeah, this is the parsha that I always cry at, and my father, Oliver Shalom, used to cry at. And I remember standing next to my father in shul one day, and I was a kid, and I yanked on his tallis. We were in a conservative shul, and I yanked on his tallis, and I said to my father, "Why are you crying?" And he said, "I cry at this parsha because I know how hard it is to work with Jewish people and how difficult it must have been for Moshe to see the fruits of his labor and not be able to partake of those fruits." And I'll never forget how sad my father was when he heard this parsha every single year. And it's a very moving, very emotional parsha, and I always think of both Moshe and how disappointed he must have been, and I think of my father, and so yes, it is very emotional and it is very beautiful, and this is the last parsha in the Torah, and we know that at this point, Moshe has passed away, and that Yehoshua has taken over. Now, the last 8, I had the last 8. Oh, I should actually really have this on the screen. I'm sorry. I clicked off to.
Too soon.
Yeah, I was a little emotional then. I'm sorry.
Manda, I have a comment or question.
Sure.
This always is something that's very hard for me to understand after all of the wonderful, wonderful things Moshe did, and his reverence to God, and his, doing so much for the people.
Right.
I don't know, a part of me is saying, was Hashem a little bit cruel to him to not allow him to actually set foot in Eretz Israel?
A little too strict, right?
Was that, it just seems really incongruous with the relationship that they had together. I don't know.
Well, we didn't talk about it right now because in the parsha where Hashem tells Moshe, speak to the rock,
right,
to bring forth water.
And he hits it.
And he hits it.
He struck it.
Right.
And and if you read the Mefarshim, this is where Hashem says, "You did not listen to me." Mm-hmm. And now we would say, he had to deal with so much
by himself.
Give a guy a break.
Right.
How much could any normal person take, leading these people through the desert and going through all that he went through. However, the Mefarshim say that Moshe Rabbeinu was held to a higher standard, and that he wasn't able to, he wasn't able to get away with any challenges that, that wasn't anything less than perfection.
And
There's,
also, they were going into a new place and it was a new beginning
right,
and they needed a new leader.
that's
Moshe
also
had
true.
led them so
They
far
really-
and they needed
So-
somebody new.
So that, Avis, thank you. That's that there's a midrash and that which is a story, and there's no text in the Torah about this, but there is a story that says that Hashem takes Moshe Rabbeinu on a tour of Eretz Yisrael years after Bnei Yisrael have settled the land, and Moshe says, what is this? What are they doing? How are they worshiping you? I don't see anything familiar. I don't understand. What are they doing? Where are they? You know, where are the leaders? Where is this? So exactly what Ava said, Moshe at that point had been the desert leader. He had been the one taking this ragtag people of slaves from from the disjointed and unjoined people to become a nation. He was the one who created the nation of the tribes. He unites them. He brings them the law, because what does a nation need once they're formed? They need laws and how to govern themselves. And then he actually has a relationship with Hashem so that he can teach the people how to have a relationship with God and how to be obedient to Hashem. And with that obedience, the nation will survive and it will prosper. And he tries to teach them many lessons in the desert. And it has many, many challenges. And he would not have known necessarily how the next generation, you know, if you watch Star Trek, you know,
Yeah.
then after the Star Trek, they go the next generation. It's all new people, it's all new commanders, all new leaders. So, you know, I'm not equating Moshe with Star Trek, but I'm just trying to tell you that
William
sometimes you need new leadership. And here was at this point, the disciple, servant of Moshe was Yehoshua. Now, what I wanted to do before we closed for the day,
You mentioned that Moshe was the desert leader.
yes,
So that would classify Yehoshua as what?
Yehoshua was the first leader in the new that crossed over the Yarden, the Jordan River, and brought the people, Bnei Yisrael, into Canaan.
Okay.
Okay. And there would be many, many trials and tribulations, as we will learn in Sefer Yehoshua. But a point now that I want to make is, if you will look at Pasuk 5 all the way to the end of the Torah, Pasuk 5 starts with, and Moses.
Let's see, I'm just coming to the end of a class. Can I phone you in about 10 minutes?
Moshe, the servant of the Lord, died in the land of Moab. Okay, and now we don't know where he's buried. Now, if he dies before the end of the Torah, who is writing these last 8 psukim?
Joshua, no?
No, there a story that Hashem dictated it to him and he wrote it and he cried when he wrote it.
Okay, then you know the Talmud.
I don't know anything.
There
Very
are, of course, 2.5 different opinions. Well, 2.5 different opinions in the Talmud, in Baba Batra. The first opinion is under the sage of Rabbi Yehuda in the Talmud, and he says that Yehoshua wrote the last 8 Pesukim of the Torah.
Okay.
Now, there is always an opposing opinion, and Rabbi Shimon says, no, the entire Torah was written by Moshe Rabbeinu because he is the disciple of Hashem, and it is called the Torah of Moshe, the servant of God. And so he says that Hashem dictated the last 8 Pesukim to Moshe before he died, and Moshe wrote it with tears. Now, what does that mean? He wrote it with tears. Did he write the Torah crying? Or did he actually write it with his tears? Now, that's where the half opinion comes, because it is said by some that Moshe wrote it while crying, and his tears were used to write the words that were dictated by Hashem. And at the end of that writing, because tears are clear, you don't see the letters that were written, that Yehoshua comes and fills in the letters after the death of Moshe Rabbeinu, and he fills it in with ink. So that's the half opinion. The other part of the opinion, the majority of the Mefarshim, the commentators, feel that Yehoshua was privileged to write the last 8 Pesukim of the Torah, and that Moshe did not. So you can select whichever story you like, because there is no definitive answer to who wrote the last Pesukim. Now, Yehoshua had, if we take a look at, now we just did a selection of the 26 Parshiot where Yehoshua's name appears. I wanted to give you a flavor of who this person was that we're going to learn about. And Yehoshua has been present. He's been involved and active in every single event that the people have experienced during the course of the 40 years of wandering in the desert. And he has never strayed from Moshe Rabbeinu's side, and he has always been a source of support and strength for Moshe. And we learn this through all of the events that took place in the Torah where his name appears. And he is steadfast. And not only is he a supporter of Moshe, he is steadfast in his trust in Hashem, and he never wavers. He always shows that he is devoted and to God, and that he is an independent, intuitive leader. And he never asks for anything for himself during the course of the Torah. He is always by Moshe's side and to help him. So we ask ourselves, there probably could not be any more person that was more worthy to become Moshe's successor. And there's probably no one even more capable to be Moshe's successor. And what we find here is that in the book of Devarim that we just finished reading, the end of the Torah, that the story closes 3 rings. The end of the Chumash closes first of all the circle that is the biography of the life of Moshe Rabbeinu. It ends and has a conclusion. We know, and Moshe Rabbeinu is the only one in the Torah that we have from birth to death. And the whole story has come full circle. Now, the second circle that the end of Devarim, the end of the Chumash closes for us is the story of the book of the Torah. The Torah, the 5 books of Moses, the Chumash, the Pentateuch, what we know as Torah comes to an end. And so the whole, from Bereshit to getting the people to the land of Eretz Yisrael comes to a close in the Torah. And the third circle that Devarim closes for us is this historical circle relating to the people of Israel. With Moshe's death, the last stage is the last stage in the process of the Exodus from Egypt and Israel's entire sojourn through the desert, the wilderness, and that comes to an end, and the people of Israel are now no longer under the leadership of Moshe Rabbeinu. They are now under the new leadership of Yehoshua ben Nun, who they stand before, knowing that he is their leader, and they will now enter the next historical stage of entering the promised land and conquering it and settling it. And this is where we will begin next week.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Rhonda, 3 things I picked up from the end that my lack of Jewish knowledge might highlight. The fact that Moshe died at 120, is that where the bitui comes from, Ad 120?
Yes.
I'm thinking that.
Yes.
And the fact that they mourn for 30 days, that's where our 1 month mourning comes from.
Yes.
Very good.
And the fact that Moshe, the Torah was passed on to Bnei Israel, Ba'al Peh. That is how the Torah was passed on from generation to generation until it was finally written.
Well, it was written. It was written
first
by Moshe Rabbeinu, but Moshe Rabbeinu gives it over to the people, and then the elders teach. There was a process in the.
In other words, the Torah was already written by
Yes.
the time Moshe died.
Yes.
Written.
Yes, that's why I just.
Some biopic.
Yes, so the oral law was not written yet.
Well, there's my confusion. What do you mean the oral law?
The oral law is like the commentary on how to do things and what to do. And that was codified later.
Okay,
rabbis.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on what
I've
we
got-
learned? Yes.
I've got a question, Rhonda.
Yes.
I think you've partly answered it, but I'm not sure. There doesn't seem to be any mention of any competition to Yehoshua. You know, it was a cut and dry decision that he was going to follow on the leadership. Is
Well-
there any mention of any other people who may have been suitable to lead?
There was mention of other people, but they weren't suitable. We reread it a couple weeks ago in Parsha Korach. If you recall, Korach was a relative of Moshe, and he challenged Moshe's authority and why he was leading the Jewish people. And the whole story is that you know, he says to Moshe, I don't think you should be doing this. who made you the leader? And he says, Moshe says, well, actually God did, but we can see what God has to say. And they, if you recall, Aaron and they put their staffs in the sand, and the leaders of Korach, Korach and his sons, actually challenged Moshe and say, I don't think so. I don't think that you're the one to do the leading. And they end up being swallowed up in the desert. And then, the Moshe and Aaron say to the people, listen, we will, they put their staffs into the sand of the desert, and they said, let's let God to make the decision who's to be the leader here. And of course, the next day, the staffs of Aaron and Moshe are blooming with almond blossoms. And Hashem, that was the identification that Hashem had selected Moshe and Aaron to lead the people.
Do we know what happened to Caleb?
No, I mean, we probably will see him as we go into the promised land, because he's the only one of the spies of that generation who can go.
Right.